Pete, to start with, going to talk about Nottingham Forest. Now, their appeal was rejected. Can you give us the latest news, please, on that and your reaction to that news?
Obviously, Forest made that appeal in the hope that they could get that 4 points reduced, but obviously the Independent Panels Commission has decided to stick with what they initially was given with the 4 points thing. No massive surprise. Initially, we were surprised that Forest had gone and appealed it, and then they went ahead and they were hopeful of getting some type of reduction. But yeah, obviously, I don't think the main case that was against Forest here was maybe the way their legal team went about it. That's what came out from the Appeals Commission's verdict, that they weren't too happy that there was a microscopic look at the initial charge and the points deduction. So I don't think that helped Forest's case as well. The main thing about this is I think we've had this appeal heard before the end of the season because we didn't want this to drag on. It's unfortunate in Forest because they'll be feeling that Everton had their appeal or their points deduction reduced on appeal from 10 to 6. So obviously Forest were hopeful that might have set a precedent that they would get some points back as well. But I think it's done now. There's been no reply or comment from Forest on the appeals verdict. So I think now Forest have now decided just to wash their hands out of it, brush it under the carpet, move on and focus on these last 2 games of the season. And they're well placed now to secure Premier League survival, even with these points deductions, 3 points clear of Luton with a superior goal difference as well. And a win at the weekend against Chelsea at the City Ground could secure Premier League safety for another year. And they can forget all about these points deductions and focus ahead on next season.
Pete, do we know about the reasons, please, for the reasons why it was rejected? Was it made clear in any statements at all?
Well, the main reason for it was if the Appeals Commission felt that obviously Forest, their obviously appeal was based on why they felt they should have taken the sale of Brennan Johnson from Tottenham into account for the end of the financial year. But obviously that deal didn't go through until transfer deadline day in September, when obviously the end of year accounts had been filed for June of that year as well. They could have sold them to Brentford very early last summer, and that would have cleared them of any PSR rules. But obviously Forest were hoping to get as much money as possible for Brennan Johnson, and that's what they did when they sold him to Tottenham. I think it was around 47.5 million, when I think Brentford's was just over 35 million. So if you're looking at it as a business side of things, at the time they probably felt they were right to hold out for a bigger fee from Tottenham as well. But obviously with the deal happening past the end of the financial year, it cost Forest, and that's why they got those PSR breaches in the first place. So I think that was one of the mitigating circumstances that Forest were going on, but the Appeals Commission didn't uphold that, and they felt that the 4 point deduction should have stood as it did.
Paul, what was your reaction to that news? And actually, how concerned do you think Nuno will be about the drop? Or actually, do you think their squad now will feel quite comfortable they'll be able to stay up this season?
Well, my first reaction was the penalties and the way that they conducted themselves after Everton. It may be a conspiracy theory, but when you go questioning the governing body and releasing tweets like you did after the Everton game and poking the bear when you're already asking the bear for some points back, listen, maybe completely wrong and maybe barking up the wrong tree, but actually I wouldn't, did they stare a hornet's nest when they're asking for points back and they behaved in the way that they did? They're still to be reprimanded for that. They're still to be punished for what they did after the Everton game. So we'll see. But actually, I do think they've got enough to stay up. I mean, you look now, they're 3 points clear of Luton. Luton's recent results, not ideal. The draw at home to Everton, lost at Wolves, lost at home to Brentford, lost at Man City. They're conceding a lot of goals at Luton. Forest have got winnable games. They do concede too many goals, but they've got games ahead of them where, the Chelsea game this weekend, that wouldn't hold too much fear for them, the way that Chelsea are playing away from home. At home, Chelsea are a different animal now. They're 7th in the league. They're flying up the league. But I think Forest have got enough at home. And the last game's at Burnley, I think, which could be a decider. But I don't think they'll have to get that many points, because I'm not so sure that Luton will, in the form that they're in. I think they've got a strong enough squad to stay in the Premier League, Forest. And they've got players in that squad, like we spoke about before, like Gibbs-White, Hudson-Odoi, Elanga, who definitely won't be in that team if they're in the Championship.
Pete, on that note as well, then, I mean, whether they do stay up or they go down, what's the likelihood, please, they're going to have to sell players going into the summer to balance the books? Are there some concerns around FFP for next season as well?
Yeah, there's definitely concerns around the FFP and the PSR breaches. If they want to avoid them, they potentially will have to cash in on some players before June 30th when they file their accounts for this season. As I said, the most sellable asset is Morgan Gibbs-White. He's the one who's been the talisman for Forest again this season. I'm sure there'll be massive interest in him if there's any indications that Forest do have to sell. And as I said, Forest could command a huge fee for Gibbs-White. You're probably looking 50 to 60 million pounds for him as well. And Gibbs-White himself might feel the time is right to move on to a club playing at a higher level if he wants to try and break into that England squad in the near future as well. He probably himself wants to be playing in European football and everything else as well. So I think there will be offers for Morgan Gibbs-White. Even if Forest do secure Premier League survival, I think he's done more than enough to show that he could potentially play at a higher level. And I think for Forest themselves, they're probably bracing themselves for interest in the likes of Gibbs-White as well, and potentially other players as well, the likes of Murillo at centre-back as well. I think there'll be interest in him come this summer transfer window as well. But yeah, I think for Forest now, they just need to move on, plan ahead for next season as well. It's been a tumultuous season for them on and off the pitch, and now Nuno's in there. He'll be preparing for his first full season in charge, and we know he's a top manager. He's done very well, especially when he was at Wolves. That if he gets that pre-season now to look forward to as well, and also a transfer window that he'll be hoping to make more signings as well. But if there's more signings to be made, Forest are definitely going to have to balance the books with potential player exits as well.
And Pete, in terms of a breach, are we talking about a potential sanction? Could it be a points deduction, embargo? What would we potentially expect for next season then?
No idea. Plain and simple. You can't guess what. If it's a serious breach and it's a big fee, it'll be the same as it was this year. I'm guessing it'll be a points deduction, what Everton got and what Nottingham Forest got as well. So I think it'll be similar to that. We'll have to wait to see when they publish their end of financial year accounts at the end of June, and we'll have to wait and see. But if they are in breach of the rules, there's no doubts that they're probably facing another points deduction.
And Paul, from their squad's perspective going into next season, how do you think they'll reflect on this year? And actually, what will the aims be going into next year? Could they try and push for a top 10 finish? Would it be a top 12? What would be a success for them for next season under Nuno?
Well, I think there's a big question. I mean, the second season is always the hardest. I mean, to stay in the Premier League. I think the owners, there's been a little bit of unrealistic optimism and aims set. I think to stay in the Premier League and establish yourself this season as a Premier League team, especially with having the points deducted, would be a decent season for them. I mean, the turmoil around the club at the moment after the Everton game, the press releases, the way that they're portraying themselves in the media, I don't think they've been great this season, in all honesty. And I think with the season ticket hikes as well, I think the 23-24%, the City Ground played such a huge part in them staying in the Premier League last year, to then put your fans through whatever's gone on this season on the pitch, and then to try and increase your season tickets by that. It's just not a good feeling around Forest at the moment. I think they need to regroup next year. A top 10 finish, is it realistic? Probably not. You just avoided relegation this season. You look at the size of the squad. If they're facing FFP, PSR rules again, they are going to have to thin that squad out. It's about consolidation with some kind of progression. They're obviously going to want some kind of progression, but actually the third season, again, yes, build on what you've got. But the FFP and the PSR rules, that they're killing teams, and they're not allowing teams to grow as fast as they want to grow and buy the players that they want. And for Forest next season, if they are to lose the players that we mentioned, like Gibbs-White, Murillo, etc., they're going to be tough to replace. Murillo was a great find. The scout network did really well finding him, and there'll be a lot of big clubs that will test Forest resilience with bids for him this summer. But actually, when you look at what they could potentially lose next year, is top 10 realistic? It's a big ask, especially if they are facing another points deduction.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.